At my 70th birthday dinner, my daughter-in-law smiled, handed me a gold envelope, and said, "This is your gift." Inside was an eviction notice. The cake was the kind they know I like. Vanilla sponge with too much frosting, the kind that makes you feel like a child again. My son Daniel let our granddaughter blow out the candles for me, because apparently even wishes are communal now. When the laughter died down and the clinking of plates faded, Melissa, Daniel's wife, stood up with that pageant smile she wears when she's about to be cruel in a way she can later deny. "This is for you, Mom," she said, "to make life easier." Inside the envelope was a 3-page notice from a boutique senior placement service, and under it, a typed letter on a lawyer's letterhead. Notice to quit. My house, my husband's and mine. 42 years of wallpaper and wobbly shelves and Christmas mornings and the mark on the doorframe where Daniel was 12 and thought 6 feet would make him a man. "Is this a joke?" I asked softly, tasting sugar and metal. Daniel didn't meet my eyes. "Mom, it's safer. The stairs, your forgetfulness. I remember everything, even what they prefer I forget." Melissa put a manicured hand on my wrist like I was a trembling goat she intended to lead gently into the slaughterhouse. "We did the research. The nice place by the lake has a piano in the common room. You'll love it. They even have watercolor classes. Outside, the dahlias I planted the year Daniel left for college were leaning toward the light like thirsty women." Inside, I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. "Watercolor," I repeated. "And when do I need to leave my home?" Melissa's voice softened to a hush, the way people talk to infants and the almost dead. "The service said they could take you next Sunday. We've already reserved your room." My room. Once I thought I knew the meanings of words. Marriage, mother, home. It seems language changes when money arrives and patience runs out. The floorboard we'd had replaced after the leak makes a different sound when you tap it. Hollow, then solid, then hollow again. I pried it up with the butter knife I've kept on my nightstand for 42 years and reached into the cool dark. The lockbox was still there, the combination still muscle memory. Inside, the quitclaim deed I refused to file. The handwritten letter from my husband dated 18 months before he died. "If they ever try to move you, don't sign until you call Alvarez." My neighbor's name, the old man whose orange tree drops fruit over our fence. The man with a spine straight as winter who walks to the courthouse every weekday morning in the same gray hat. I sat on the floor, the letter shaking in my hands, and listened to the house breathe around me. Pipes settling, the old oak creaking like a tired ship, the hot water heater ticking like a bomb. "Not yet," I whispered to the walls. "I won't leave you yet." In the morning, I called Alvarez. He answered on the second ring, and when I said my name, he was quiet for a long time. "I wondered when you'd call," he said. "Come by, bring the papers, and stop apologizing for being right." I didn't realize I had been apologizing. We mothers, we apologize in advance for the mess other people make. I placed the gold envelope into my purse beside the letter my dead husband wrote, and the key I hoped never to use. Then I put on my church coat and locked the door to the house they had already decided I didn't deserve to keep. I'm old, not disposable, and I have not yet played the last card on the table. Alvarez's office smells like lemons and old books. He is the kind of man who files paper with the same care he says grace, reverent and practical. He poured me water, sat across from me, and let me lay out the— "He never told me," I said, not with anger, with the quiet of a person who realizes the last conversation she had with her husband is still growing new leaves. "He asked me to," Alvarez said. He said, "If they're kind, she'll never need it. If they're not, she'll know why. Outside, the lemon tree was full and heavy. The wind did that soft brushing thing that makes old women think of girls' hair in long afternoons. I handed Alvarez the gold envelope. Melissa says the stairs are dangerous. He smiled without his mouth changing shape. So is greed. We planned like thieves who had once been priests, carefully, guiltily, expertly. He would file a notice of the life estate and the trust documents with the county recorder that afternoon. He would send a cease and desist to the boutique firm. He would prepare a temporary restraining order if they tried to force entry. And Daniel? I asked finally, the name bitter and sweet in my mouth like marmalade. We will give him a chance to be a son before we ask the court to treat him as a stranger. That night, as I chopped onions for soup and set the table for one, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't know. I almost didn't answer, but old women and birds share a superstition. Ignore the wrong call, and you'll miss the right omen. Hello? All I could hear was breathing, then a whispered voice from a mouth too close to the phone. Don't sign anything. It was my sister's voice, Jerry. She died 6 months before my husband, breast cancer that ate the good in her and left the mean, and we forgave the mean because pain likes to dress in ugly costumes. Jerry? I said, and the room went cold. Click. I stood very still. The onions went from sweet to bitter in the pan. The house shifted the way it sometimes does just before the pipes sigh. In the drawer near the stove, I keep a little tape recorder my husband used for his sermons when Pastor Ruth asked him to, and you should stop treating my home like a waiting room. Things happen slowly in houses like mine. Paint peels by degrees, bread goes stale over days, not hours. Birds build nests 1 twig at a time. But ruin comes quick. 1 envelope, 1 lawyer letter, 1 shrug from a son who thinks his mother is an old suitcase that needs a new shelf. And justice, when it shows up, even late, even limping, moves like a woman who has been planning her exit for a long, long time. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of my front door opening, not gently, professionally, a key I did not issue, a coordinate movement of bodies that belong to people who use phrases like per protocol and for your safety. Good morning, Mrs. Carter, a bright voice sang, footsteps already on my stairs. We're here to help you pack for the transition. Melissa said you were excited. I sat up slowly, smoothed the quilt my mother stitched the winter my father's cough was bad, and slid my feet into the slippers I keep under the bed in case of earthquakes and guests who mistake my house for theirs. In the hallway stood 2 young women in matching polo shirts, their hair pulled back too tight, eyes flicking to each other like minnows. Behind them, Melissa, clipboarded and perfumed, and Daniel, carrying a box with my photo albums. Put that down, I said, sharper than I intended. Mom, put it down. Daniel blinked. Melissa's smile didn't move, but the muscles near her eyes tightened. We're on a schedule, she said. The facility has graciously allowed us to. The facility will receive a letter from my lawyer on Monday morning. I said, today is Saturday. You don't get to move me like I'm a couch. One of the girls in the polo shirt stepped back. We can come back, she whispered to Melissa. If this isn't a good time. Melissa bared her teeth the way a sweet dog does right before it remembers it is also a wolf. It's a great time, she said. We really can come back. Melissa laughed a little. A sound like glass. We have the doctor's note, she said, and pulled out a paper signed by a physician I had never met. A man with a practice in a building where parking costs $12 an hour. He evaluated you last month. Memory deficits, impaired judgment. Do you remember, Mom? Or did you forget? I took the paper, my hands suddenly cold. A signature can be a kind thing. It can get you a passport, a mortgage, a marriage license. It can also be a knife. The tape recorder on my nightstand was red light ready. I pressed the button. "You paid a man to say I am unfit," I said. Not a question. Melissa's smile faltered. "We are looking out for you. You forget bills, you forget appointments, you left the stove on." "I left the stove on in 1998, I said, "when your husband was still in high school and you were still teaching yourself how to lie with your eyes." Daniel flinched. The girls shifted. The house held its breath. I reached under the quilt and pulled out the envelope from Alvarez. On top, a copy of my husband's trust, the life estate notice, and a letter addressed to Daniel, certified, not yet mailed. "Read," I said. Melissa took it. Her eyes skimmed, then slowed, then stopped. She went pale the way people do when they realize the person they have cornered has been holding a door behind them the entire time. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's your education," I said. "You always wanted one." Daniel read over her shoulder. I watched his face change like weather. First confusion, then anger, then a boy's grief. "Dad did this?" he said. "Your father loved you," I said, "and he loved me. He also loved responsibility. He left this." I sat in the chair by the window, where the afternoon light makes dust look like a parade of gold. Then I called Alvarez, who had already anticipated the call. "They tried a physician letter," I said. "I expected as much," he replied. "I spoke to the doctor this morning. He was cordial. He also hangs his shingle in a building owned by Melissa's firm. There's a trail." "We will follow it," I said. He chuckled, and for a moment he sounded like my husband when he found an extra 20 in the pocket of a coat he'd forgotten to wear. "I have a motion drafted to freeze any transfer attempts. Monday morning we'll file. In the meantime, make tea." And because I am an old woman who has seen too much to ignore simple advice, I made tea. At dusk, Pastor Ruth rang the bell with the same rhythm she's used since the days we mounted that bell together on the wooden frame. 3 quick, 2 slow. I let her in and poured her tea without asking if she wanted it. "Alvarez told me," she said, taking my hand. "You know I don't like to meddle. I consider it unchristian. But I find I like injustice less." We made a plan for Sunday. I would go to church, wear the blue dress with the collar that always makes me look like I have money. I would sit in the second pew, where Melissa could see me, and understand that I rise when I choose. After the service, I would leave early. Alvarez would meet me here at noon with a notary and 2 witnesses from the choir. We would sign what needed signing: powers of attorney, the notice, the affirmation of capacity from my actual doctor who has been putting up with my briskness for 20 years. "We will do nothing cruel," Pastor Ruth said. "Only clean." That night, the phone rang again. The same unlisted number. I pressed record before. "You're safe through the weekend, but be careful. The world is cruel. The world is also crowded with people who remember kindness and pay it forward like a tithe." I slept with the letter under my pillow like a girl with a secret, and woke with clarity ringing in my bones like church bells. Sunday morning I sat in the pew. Daniel and Melissa entered late, held hands too tightly, sang without knowing the words. I thanked God for breath, for bread, for lemons, for neighbors with long memories, for policemen who eat donuts and keep promises. I thanked God for my stubborn heart, the one they call forgetful, because it refuses to forget the right things. When Pastor Ruth said, "Go in peace," I did. Home, where Alvarez waited with a notary and 2 altos who sight-read legalese like sheet music. I signed, they stamped, we prayed. And somewhere between the amen and the kettle boiling, I heard the front gate open. Daniel, alone. Eyes red-rimmed, hat in hand like a boy at a principal's office. "Mom," he said, and sat without being asked. I didn't know about the doctor. I didn't know about the push to sell. I thought we were saving you, but I think we were saving something else. "Their mortgage," I said. He nodded, then lifted his eyes to mine. "Who does the house go to when, you know?" "Not you," I said. "But you can serve on the trust if you act like a son." He cried, ugly, honest tears. I handed him a tissue and looked at the door, expecting Melissa's knock like thunder. It didn't come. Sometimes the enemy understands the field has changed and retreats to learn the new rules. Sometimes the enemy underestimates how quickly old women can reload. Monday morning bloomed bureaucratic and beautiful. Alvarez and I stood in the county. Do try to keep up. She was quiet long enough for me to hear a muffled door closing and the ambient thrum of an office where assistants get yelled at. "You left the house to a charity," she said finally, in a voice that made the word charity sound like the flu. "You disinherited your only child." "I disinherited greed," I said. "Daniel is welcome to inherit work." "You vindictive." "Careful," I said softly. "My recorder is on." She laughed. "You think you can catch me?" "No," I said. "I think you'll turn yourself in." After we hung up, I wrote a letter to Daniel, not the kind mothers write for show, the kind that reads itself back to you when you're old and cramped and mean, and reminds you there was a day when you told the truth. "Son," I wrote, "I know you think I chose strangers over blood, but blood is not a bond unless we bleed for the same things. I bled in this house, on the tile when I cut my hand on a broken glass at your 10th birthday, in the kitchen when I nicked my finger making your father's stew, in the garden when the rose canes bit back. I bled for a roof, for bread, for your future. I won't bleed for Melissa's marble countertops." I sealed the letter and slid it beneath his windshield wiper when he stopped by that afternoon, as if he were a teenager again, and I was leaving him a note begging him to be home by 11. He saw me through the window, lifted the paper and held it to his chest for a second before tucking it, careful as an apology, into his coat. Wednesday, Pastor Ruth texted, "Brace. Court date set, Friday. Melissa petitioned for emergency guardianship." I pressed my hand to my sternum, the way I do when a sneeze hides from me. "Already?" I wrote. "She moves like a fox. Then we pray like hounds," Ruth replied. "Court is a peculiar church. The pews are hard. That's an odd order of operations for someone acting in the best interests of a vulnerable elder." Melissa's lawyer began a speech about safety and stairs and trip hazards. The judge held up a hand. "And yet, Mrs. Carter has a life estate, an affidavit of capacity, friends, a physician of record, and counsel. You have a for-hire doctor and a moving crew." Alvarez stood. "Your Honor, if I may," and handed up a page, Exhibit G. a printout of Melissa's boutique firm's internal memo advertising fast-track elder transitions, complete with a discount for multiple properties. You could hear the oxygen leave Melissa's lungs. The judge leaned forward, his gardening face now storm weather. "Petition denied," he said. "Further, this court issues a protective order against any attempt to interfere with Mrs. Carter's housing, finances, or medical choices without court approval. Counsel, I suggest your client consider her exposure." Exposure. Such a kind word for nakedness. We stood. We left. The hallway smelled like old coffee and a new start. Daniel met me by the elevators and put his arms around me the way he used to when monsters were closets and not wives. "Mom," he said into my hair, "I'm sorry." "I know," I said. "Be better than sorry." I expected retreat. I underestimated Melissa's talent for escalation. Saturday afternoon, while I was trimming the rose canes, a black SUV rolled up like a threat that had learned to drive. A woman I recognized from the fancy women's gym on Center Street stepped out, heels too high for grass, smile too thin for peace. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "I represent the Prospect Foundation. We're making cash offers on behalf of a donor who is very interested in community investment." She glanced around, eyes glinting. "This block is poised for a transformation." The church parking lot had more cars than a bake sale with a raffle for a boat. Alvarez came with a folder. Officer Kinley came with donuts that made the alto section clap. We sat in the fellowship hall and drew a map. Parcels, owners, vulnerabilities, allies. "We can form a heritage overlay," Alvarez said. "Fast? No, but possible. We lock down the church, your house, the community center. We file for grants. We make it painful to profit from our expiration." Ruth nodded. "And we tell a story the city cannot ignore. This block fed the hungry for 30 years. This block houses the elderly. This block raised children who became judges and janitors and men who fix things without needing to be asked." That night my phone buzzed with a message from a number saved as Daniel. New because I am willing to love the parts of him that are learning. "Daniel, she says you're ruining our future." Me. "She tried to sell my present." "Daniel, what do I do?" I typed and deleted twice, then wrote, "Grow up." He read it. No bubbles came. Sometimes the truth is a stone that has to sit in a boy's pocket a long time before he realizes it was a tool. Sunday morning, the Prospect Foundation lady returned, with a man in a navy suit and a watch that ticked louder than his heart. They knocked. I answered. Alvarez stood behind me like a bookshelf. "Mrs. Carter," the man said smoothly, "you may believe you're protecting your legacy. Consider that sometimes legacy requires letting go." I opened the door wider. Behind us, the choir warmed up for service, their vowels round and righteous. Pastor Ruth came to the threshold with ink on her fingers. "Legacy," she said, "isn't a condo, it's a choice." The man smirked. "Choice is costly." "So is silence," Ruth said. They left with their folder heavy with the weight of the no they'd been given. I went to church where children on scooters drew chalk lines and dared each other to cross. I drank coffee. The lemon tree dropped a fruit with a soft thud that sounded like punctuation. Across the street, the Prospect Foundation lady watched from her car and wrote something on a clipboard. I waved. She didn't wave back. That's all right. Some people only learn to wave after they've drowned. It rained the way bakers dust a cake, light, patient, a sift of gray over my roof. I was peeling lemons when the knock came. 3 quick, 2 after a pause. Not Pastor Ruth. Not Alvarez. I opened the door. 2 badges. Adult Protective Services. The woman's voice was kind, but carried the fatigue of someone who's met too many children polite in public and cruel in private. Mrs. May, we received an anonymous report. Fall risks, mixed medications, possible fire hazards. We need to conduct a safety check. I let them in. I am not afraid of inspections. Only the quiet corners no one bothers to inspect. The kitchen was spotless. My pill organizer was labeled by color and day. A fire extinguisher hung where it should. The smoke alarms had fresh batteries from last month. I handed them my affidavit of capacity, the protective order from the court, and my emergency contacts: Alvarez, Pastor Ruth, Dr. Lim, Officer Kinley. The woman read, and her eyes softened. "Your home is warm," she said, and lowered her clipboard. "I'm sorry we had to intrude." "You're just doing your job," I said. The anonymous caller wasn't. I showed her the doorbell footage. The Prospect Foundation lady in a black raincoat at my gate the night before, phone at her mouth, whispering. List hoarding, meds confusion, kitchen hazard. That voice. I'd heard it already, over stilettos that don't know grass. The APS worker pressed her lips together, with no embrace, no overdone comfort. "You're learning fast. Keep learning. There's more." He pulled a USB from his jacket. "Melissa's drive. She backs up at our house. Emails with Prospect, a script for emergencies, a price sheet for converting assets. If you want. Evidence doesn't lie," I said, "but don't make yourself the errand boy of your own shame. Let counsel handle it." That evening, Alvarez slid the USB into his laptop like a physician placing a stethoscope. The screen lit. An email thread titled Bundle and Fast Track. An attachment, physician letter template.docx. A spreadsheet, inventory and exit, carterblock.xlsx, with a neat pipeline. APS report, code compliance, safety letter, contract. "Enough to sue," Alvarez murmured. "Elder abuse statute, civil conspiracy, fraud, abuse of process. We'll image the drive, preserve chain of custody, and file motions before they can shred their sins. Melissa will smell the smoke," I said. He smiled without showing teeth. "Then let her wonder where the fire is." I brewed tea. That's what you do when the enemy prefers gasoline. You put on water and wait. Outside, the lemon tree let go of a fruit with a soft, certain thud. Inside, the house breathed the way old ships do. Steady, storied, unafraid of whether it has already survived. Daniel lingered by the door. "She says you're ruining our future. She tried to sell my present," I said. "What should I do?" he asked. "Grow up," I said, and watched the truth land in his pocket like a stone he'd one day find he could sharpen tools with. When they were gone, I labeled a new folder in my filing cabinet, Their Attempts. It sat beside Our Proof and My Peace. The kettle sang. I poured, sweetened, and stood at the window while the street— "They always do." "Investment," he said, clicking to a slide of smiling children under a rooftop garden. "Vibrancy. Safety. This corridor has been neglected. Our plan brings life back." I looked around at the people who packed the room. Barbers, teachers, the widow who runs the tamale cart, the boy who learned to read at our pantry table. "Neglected," he said, and the air shifted. There are words you shouldn't say in certain rooms unless you know their history. When it was our turn, Alvarez didn't click anything. He carried paper. He believes in paper the way some people believe in angels. "This is not blight," he said. "This is legacy. The church feeds 400 families monthly. Mrs. Carter's house is covered by a recorded life estate. The community center runs a clinic on Thursdays. You cannot pave over usefulness and call it progress." He handed the clerk a packet. Top page, the recorded life estate. Next, a letter from the clinic's director with numbers, patients served, insulin vouchers given, blood pressures lowered. Then a letter from APS, malicious report, no concerns. Then a chain of custody affidavit for a USB image. "Exhibit G," Alvarez said, voice even. Emails between Prospect Foundation's donor and counsel, templates for elder capacity letters, staged report flowcharts, and a spreadsheet titled Inventory and Exit, Carter Block. Metadata indicates authorship by Melissa Hart, employed by Calhoun and Sloan, who also manage Prospect's donor-advised funds. We allege a coordinated scheme to accelerate transfers by weaponizing process. The Navy suit's jaw tightened. The gym lady stopped smiling. The councilwoman from our district, hair gone silver since the last time I brought her a pie after surgery, leaned forward. "Officer Kinley, can you speak to APS and code enforcement contacts at this address?" He stood. "Yes, councilwoman." Both reports were anonymous, both unfounded, both within 24 hours of each other. "Because there is more. Exhibit H." He held up a printout, Calhoun and Sloan's internal memo, the logo discreet. "Bundle and fast track. Discount for multiple properties. Suggested sequence. APS, code, capacity letter, move. And the donor funding prospect? Sloan Grant Family Trust, Miss Hart's employer. And for the record, her mother sits as co-trustee." A small, satisfying silence. I felt the room take in the shape of the thing, the way money dresses up like philanthropy and still keeps its teeth. I stood then, because there's a time for lawyers and a time for old women. "My name is May Carter," I said into the mic that smelled faintly of coffee. "I have lived on this block 42 years. When my husband's back gave out, this church fed us. When my sister was dying, Officer Kinley's station let me sleep on their bench between chemo and sunrise. When the lights went out, we found candles together. You may call this underutilized land. I call it home." I took my husband's letter from my purse, the one I keep folded and warm from my body. My husband wrote that I am not a burden, I am a boundary. He left this house to me until I die, and then to a trust that feeds the children you put in your drawings. You cannot have it, not because I am stubborn, because I am responsible. The councilwoman cleared her throat. "Staff, what's the status of the heritage overlay request?" The planner looked surprised we had one. Alvarez handed over stamped receipts. "Filed yesterday, signatures attached. The zoning cannot be changed while the overlay is under review, and the church has initiated landmark consideration for the belframe." He smiled at Pastor Ruth. "It qualifies." The Navy suit conferred with the gym lady. Their whisper looked like retreat. Public comment opened. People stood, slowly at first, then like an altar call. The barber spoke about kids who come in hungry and leave. I expected no guests and poured two anyway. Habit. Hope. Hospitality. When the knock came, one long, one short, I knew who it was. Melissa stood on the porch without mascara, face bare the way a blueprint is bare, lines and measurements in rooms that don't exist yet. "You made a mistake," she said. "Which one?" I asked. "You should have left quietly." She said, "Now you've made enemies." I held her gaze the way you hold a heavy bowl, two hands, careful not to drop. "I don't make enemies, Melissa. I make records." She looked past me into the house as if trying to memorize the route. "This isn't over. No, I said, and handed her a copy of the packet, the emails, the templates, the memo, her name in the metadata, her mother's trust on the donor line. But your part is. For the first time since she tried to smile me out of my own kitchen, she had no words. Inside, the kettle sang. Outside, the streetlights clicked on, counting us again. I shut the door. The cup steamed. I left one on the table across from mine, for my husband, for my sister, for the next neighbor who needed a place to sit before they remembered how to stand. By Wednesday, the story had teeth. Alvarez called at dawn, the way men do when they've been up all night, walking paper through rooms that don't open for people like me. "Chain of custody is clean," he said. "We imaged the drive. The DA's elder abuse unit wants a copy. APS filed a sanctions request over the malicious report, and the city attorney just asked for a meeting with Calhoun and Sloan." I poured coffee into the heavy mug with a chip on the lip and watched steam rise like a psalm. "And Melissa?" "Her firm put her on administrative leave," he said. "Not discipline, yet, but the partners can smell fire. When donors become defendants, philanthropy grows shy." I stepped onto the porch. The lemon tree shook itself like an old dog and let another fruit fall. Across the street, Mrs. Ortiz watered her tomato, edges softened by time. Open when they say it's time. My hands shook. Not because I'm frail. Because memory is a muscle, and sometimes it trembles when it has to lift too much at once. We found the old tape player in the hall closet, the one my husband used to carry into tiny sanctuaries where the HVAC rattled and the spirit had to climb through dust. The motor whirred to life like a small animal waking. I pressed play. His voice filled the kitchen, warm, steady, the sound that used to make babies stop crying. "May," he said, and the house straightened its back. "If you're listening, I'm gone. And someone has confused love with logistics." He told the story of the trust the way he told bedtime to Eliza. Gently, with the parts that mattered repeated so they'd stick. "You are not a burden. You are a boundary," he said again, and I closed my eyes. "I left you time. I left them work. And when they try to make you small, remember this. We built this block with casseroles and socket wrenches. Paper only wins if you let it." The tape clicked. A new voice, Pastor Ruth from 15 years ago, laughing. "Put the bell frame in the file, you stubborn man," she said. "She'll forget where you hid it." We laughed in my kitchen, the living and the recorded, and for a moment, even grief seemed like a neighbor we'd grown used to. I slid the envelope open. Inside, a slim codicil, witnessed, notarized, never filed because it didn't need to be unless someone made it need to be. It authorized the trust to accept insurance proceeds if any posthumous beneficiary changes were attempted without my written consent. A small line with a big shadow. "Alvarez needs this," I said. "If someone tried to move the beneficiary after he died." Daniel sat back. Alvarez texted a photo of a single email thread blown up on a screen in a windowless conference room. The subject line we already knew: bundle and fast track. Under it, a reply from a partner at Calhoun and Sloan. "Do not put this in writing again." The kind of sentence judges frame mentally and hang over decisions. Kinley called at 5. "DA's in," he said. "They're convening a task force. Elder abuse, consumer fraud. Prospect's donor is lawyering up." "And May?" He cleared his throat. "We found a voicemail Melissa left at the clinic director's line by mistake. She thought she was calling her mother. Get May out before Monday. The overlay will freeze us. Use the fall stories, make it stick. We've preserved it." I made a pot of beans, not as celebration, as anchor. People think the finish line looks like confetti. Often it looks like dinner. Daniel stayed. He chopped onions like a penance and cried into them in a way neither of us had to name. We ate with the window open, the neighborhood flowing in. Kids on scooters, someone playing trumpet badly, Mrs. Ortiz muttering at a squirrel. The world, busy being itself, even while we held the line. When the knock came at dusk, it was timid. My granddaughter Eliza with a drawing, our block, the church, my house, and a lemon tree big as the sun. She held it out.
"We learned about maps," she said. "I put you in the middle so you don't get lost."
I knelt, and my knees did their complaint, and I did not apologize for them, and kissed her forehead. "You are my compass," I said. After they left, Daniel stood by the sink and looked at his hands. "Am I still your son?" "Always," I said. "But now you're also a witness." He nodded. Not dramatic, not promising miracles. Prospect Foundation issued a statement the way foxes leave tracks when they don't want to be found. We withdraw our proposal to allow further community dialogue. Calhoun and Sloan put Melissa on indefinite leave, then scrubbed her name from their website like a stain that kept showing up in the white shirts. The DA announced a joint task force: elder abuse, consumer fraud, abuse of process, words that look cold on paper and feel like blankets when you're old and tired. I made soup. People think victory tastes like champagne. Mostly it tastes like onions and patience. Daniel came with bread he'd overbaked on purpose, brown too dark at the edges, contrition you can slice. He set down a folded paper before he sat. "Separation filed," he said simply. I didn't ask for details. I didn't bless or scold. I ladled soup. We ate like we were building something, one spoon at a time. At dusk, Melissa stood at the edge of my walk, not daring the porch. No makeup, hair pulled back, the way women look when the mirror finally tells them the truth. She held nothing in her hands. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, voice raw. "This isn't a shelter," I replied. Not unkind, not inviting, accurate. She looked at the house as if it had taken something from her and refused to spit it back. "What happens to people like me?" she asked. "If they're lucky," I said, "they become people unlike themselves." She flinched. "I never meant you always meant," I said softly. "You just never dreamed someone would keep the receipt." She looked past me at the lemon tree, at the bell frame you can see if you stand just right on my porch and squint. "They're going to investigate my mother," she whispered. "Actions have children," I said. "We don't get to choose which ones grow up." She swallowed. "Do you?" #Meta, sex 0.05. The tamale widow sold out early. The barber tuned his radio to the game and forgot to argue. Life, proceeding. On Sunday, Eliza brought me a new map. The church, the bell, our house, the lemon tree the size of a planet, and a small rectangle beside the sidewalk with careful letters, bench. "What will it say?" she asked, solemn as a judge. I pretended to think, but the sentence had been waiting on my tongue like a prayer. "It will say, you are not a burden, you are a boundary. Sit, rest, then stand up again." She grinned the way only children can, as if they invented the sun. "I'll draw the people too," she said, "so no one forgets who sits there." "Draw them all," I said. "Even the ones who left. They taught us something." Later,
Daniel stayed to wash dishes. We don't speak apologies anymore. We stack plates and call it peace. He dried the good bowls with a towel that sheds lint and pretends it doesn't. At the door, he lingered. "Mom," he said, when you're gone, I will be in the pantry on Thursdays," I said. "In the bell when it rings. In the lemons if you cut them too thick. And in that bench when you need to sit." He swallowed. "And the house?" "It is not yours," I said. "But it will feed you. That was always the point." He nodded, a man understanding that inheritance isn't a deed, it's a duty. That night, I walked the rooms in my slippers, touching the edges like a captain runs her hand along the rail. Bedroom, quilt smooth. Hall, photos straight. Kitchen, pot soaking, lemon rinds sugaring on the rack. Front room, the chair by the window, second cup cooling on the table across from mine. I sat. The house made its ship sounds. The clock counted like a metronome forgiving the late. A breeze from the cracked window lifted the curtains with the kind of gentleness that makes you believe in mercy. I